Hi, I'm Chris Hewitt. I am the director of the Hudson Valley Current and your host of LIVElihood News. And today we're going to have something special. We're going to provide highlights of this week's talks about money, our current 5 at 5 talks. And my co-host Kevius Avery will give you our highlights of the week. Enjoy. A current medium of exchange, and the current meaning modern because it must be used today. Let me read this real quick. Money. A current medium of exchange in the form of coins and banknotes collectively, or it's also sums of money, the assets, property, and resources owned by someone or something, wealth. The definition itself is so arbitrary and abstract that a friend that Heinz and I have, Heinz knew him before Japan, and I met him in Japan, and I just spoke to him yesterday. Leander Bindewald wrote his doctoral paper about the fact that even regulators don't know what money is. They can't come up with a good definition, because in this definition it says in the form of coins and banknotes. That's wrong. We're talking now about capital. I could tell you a story, Kevius, and you could see so much value in that you'll buy me dinner. My story becomes money and capital, social capital, cultural capital. My mom is from Sicily. I could share a recipe with you. That's a form of exchange that you value. And so now we're talking value and exchange, right? The definition of money itself is so vague, even the regulators can't keep up with it. But during, before World War II in Germany, if you had a whole wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks, you have a lot of the bills, but you still can't afford bread.
Well, it was even worse. It was even worse. You tried to spend your money that you earned in the morning, and you didn't want to wait till a lunchtime because it's so much less worth.
Wow.
So you walked to the grocery store 2 times a day, and you wanted to have your money that you earned in the day in two separate charges, just to have the possibility to buy in time to keep the value up. So this was the last weeks. It was just crazy. It was just, I would say that was the huge printing money phase where you were really a bag full of money, which got you not even your daily lunch.
Wow. Yeah.
But we are, I think at the moment, we are long away from this situation, because there is not some kind of universal inflation or some kind of universal in a general meaning, because as you told, the oil, not the one that you can drink or use for cooking, which is very expensive, a good one, but the oil you can burn. And if you look at the price difference and the change, there is no inflation in pricing for this oil for burning.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a huge inflation in very good eatable.
Yes, that one. So the average household wealth of a Black household is 1/10 of what's in a white household. And it has maintained that forever, essentially.
Wow.
So we are making 1/10 of the amount of money of an average white household, which is a huge disparity, even though many Black people have a higher degree of education. And that's the profound part of all this. We are more qualified by the guises that have been set up for us to be successful, and yet we are making an astronomical amount less than our white counterparts. So even though we may be more skilled, more well-versed, more prepared, we are still not getting the jobs. We're still not being funded. We're still being ostracized out of certain communities. We are, there are so many different avenues, and I say there's so many roots to the tree that stems to these issues. And it all plays into, the fact that we don't have the wealth, the generational wealth that white people do. and it's just been systematic, and it has totally decimated our communities, leading to things that we know are true, meaning increased crime rate. Because if I'm qualified for a job and I can't get a job at McDonald's, or I can't get a job, or, if I can't even find work to feed my family, if it comes down to death and of starvation, or stealing an apple from a grocery store, now I stole that apple, I was able to feed my family, but now I'm in jail for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years for stealing this apple. I've read an article of a gentleman that was in jail for stealing for 30 years for stealing $8.
The circulation of our dollar is really about the circulation from the time that a dollar comes into your household. How long does it take before it leaves your community? So just to give a sense of the severity, in the Asian community, I believe that the dollar, before it leaves the community, is about 22 days or so. Okay. The Caucasian community, I believe it's about 15 days. Even the Hispanic community, it's in double digits. It's around 10 to 12 days or something like that. In the African-American community, it's only 6 hours. Okay. So you're talking about at its highest end in the Asian community, they circulate before their dollar leaves their community, it circulates for almost a month before it leaves their community. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, when it comes to the circulation of a dollar in a community, you got to look at it in the aspect of, like, the analogy of your blood within your body, right? The circulation of your blood in your body is extremely important. If your blood is not circulating longer than it's supposed to, what happens to the rest of your body, right? So you start to die. And the African-American community is literally dying because of economics and because of the dollar not circulating long in our community. Right now we're in a time where we're dealing with social injustice, right? But I'm of the belief that in order to attack social injustice, you have to talk about economics. You have to talk about what this country uses as its original dialect. Its original dialect is economics. Its original dialect is exchange, because that's the reason why so many of our ancestors was brought from Africa and came to the shores of the Americas, is because of exchange. Because we were the currency. If you want to really talk about it, we were the currency back then. And who holds the currency holds the power.
I mean, the Kingston Land Trust is an organization that conserves land or protects land. Let's say we protect land, right? We protect open space. Because we're in an urban environment, we protect open space for people to use. There are some land conservations out there that you'd think they're just in the existence, on behalf of the land and not so much on behalf of the people. And that is because, so in the history of conservation, usually you want to keep a place protected from being developed. So the Kingston Land Trust, however, being here in Kingston in a small urban environment, we kind of value open space for people who need it. And then when you look at people who have been historically fragmented and kept off of the land, we're generally talking about people of color. So with that, we're figuring out, how can we be more instrumental to those populations? How can we, instead of developing ways to keep people off of the land historically, how can we mend those relationships with the land that have been lost? And that's when you get to like more of a spiritual type of realm that we're crossing over into. And it's new for us. I've come on and I've recently been, my title's recently been changed to the cultural and community engagement captain. And so with that, my job is mending those relationships in a more spiritual way. And that's also when we engage, the indigenous people who have taken care of our lands for so long, and it's so it's ironic nowadays that, you know, we are talking about permaculture and all these ways of being kind and gentler and more conscious of the land, which is something that, you know, Native Americans were doing for generations before we came along. And now here we are recreating the wheel, pretending as if it's something new.
Most economic thinkers don't acknowledge their metaphysics, or they assume that there's no metaphysics going on. The actual background of my philosophical framework is Mahayana Buddhism, and the 6 virtues that I brought out in my book are based on some very deep principles that come from Mahayana Buddhism. And so I see economics, as you say, Kevius, I see economics as what I call it a social discipline, which is maybe putting a fine point on it. Whether it's a science, certainly I respect the methods of science. I actually think science is a social discipline, but that's a whole nother conversation. But certainly social is in that description of economics. And I think that's one way that economics has gone wrong, as you pointed out when you first started talking. So anyway, the 6 virtues that one could apply to economics are, first of all, generosity. And I think that's probably the easiest one to understand. But even there, that's where modern, like certainly neoclassical economics goes off the rails right there. You know, it's like, so generosity is the first one. The second one is ethics, positive ethics. And the third one is what I call non-aggression. And again, modern economics tends to think of competitiveness as a virtue. I think that competitiveness is actually, at the psychologically level, a non-virtue. It may have some benefits in structurally or of economics, but really you could boil down competition to the idea of having segmentation. In other words, you have 2 different people providing a good or service, but that doesn't mean they're in competition, certainly not in warfare with each other. So the fourth one is diligence. And the question of diligence is really, in this context, it's really about what are you putting your effort into? You know, there's a lot of diligence going on in this world that's about really deeply negative things. So I don't mean any kind of diligence, but in particular, I mean diligence to change the system. So that's what Chris and I have been working on for close to 10 years now, maybe more than 10 years. I can't remember.
Yeah, and I'll tell all the viewers that your book's name is Civil Endowment, and we will bring up an image of that soon. And it's about the transformation of economic power. When David approached me in 2009 or 2010, he called because I was running a nonprofit out of Rosendale, New York at the time, and said, what do you think about starting a local currency? And as a serial entrepreneur, I said, that sounds great. Let's do it. And so we've been working together as a team with David's philosophy and vision and my desire to bring money to our region in order to spread it and share abundance, which is what led me to meet Assemblyman Kim. And it's great to meet you today, Ramon. I think the word inclusive alone in the inclusive value ledger that you've introduced shows that you are in a way hitting those values that David was just talking about.
So, so just real quickly, the last 2 of those values that you asked me about, or virtues. The 5th one is what I call focus. And the point being with focus is like what we focus on, and knowing what we focus on, and being able to bring clarity and wisdom to the actual object of our focus is extremely important. And just for example, I'm sure that you've all, heard the discussion of like, well, economists focus on something like GDP, right? That's their focus. They spend huge amounts of money and time and focusing on something that's really not that important, or it's actually a distraction in many ways. So the question of focus is really, well, how are we going to apply, how are we going to bring wisdom into what we focus on.
And our economics should be about recirculating and capturing as much value at the very local levels. And many people have gone back from Gandhi to, every single person who talk about economic justice, I talk about the importance of what an economic justice model looks like. So this isn't something new. We just haven't been able to execute it the whole way. And this is actually extremely timely too, because, right now, as every night people, including Ramon in Brooklyn, were peacefully marching and protesting for George Floyd. As we're marching, I think more and more people, when you talk to them, they're starting to connect the dots. It's not, yes, there's racial injustice. Yes, we need to reform the police brutality, but what is the correlation there, right? Why have we expanded the police departments in places like New York City by 50% in 10 years when the population hasn't increased by 50%? So it all boils down to one another about value, and whether we have a system that extracts value from the bottom, or we have a system that adds and recirculates value in our community. If you walk around and you see a human being that's homeless, or if you see someone that's unemployed, and if you just judge them, oh well, he or she obviously is not hardworking, and why don't they just get a job like everyone else? If that's the mindset, that you're not seeing the value of another human being. If we have a better model and you see a homeless person, you're not gonna blame that person, but you'll be genuinely confused. When we have so much value around us, how the hell did this happen that this person is homeless? How do we not capture this person's value in our economy? And people say that's radical. That's not radical. Like every other developed nation in the world have already achieved this. In places like Finland, they made a conscious choice to go after this, and within 10 years, they've eliminated homelessness. Yeah, as of this year.
And I think when we neglect to recognize value, then people become part of the mass incarceration system, right? Because they're maybe poor and struggling to eat, and then cause a small crime that leads to them being in jail for 20 years.
Well, as far as extracting value from our community, you also have the completely needless and arbitrary fines and penalties that come with being incarcerated or being involved in the criminal justice system. That extracts value. Unnecessary detainment of minorities and those who are racially profiled. These are all hardworking, blue collar or working class individuals. That also takes value out of the economy. The fact that many people who engage in childcare, home care, community service are not getting properly compensated or rewarded. What we have, as Assemblyman Kim pointed out, is during this COVID crisis, you have many people without their unemployment benefits, and we've taken some terrible calls of people who are making choices between, diapers and rent, or paying food or paying bills. The economy that is crashing down around us has to be remade from the bottom up. And so supporting something like the IVL, which captures and recirculates value, which rewards and remunerates care, much of which is done by women.
The best way I can explain the spiritual evolution is, I'd love to use the Native Americans as an example, but then there are times where we feel very disconnected from that narrative. So the best way I can explain it in today's terms is almost like the respect that has been lost in looking at the land as a commodity and how we treat it. It mimics the respect that was lost when we looked at people of color as a commodity and the way we were once treated. Not that today is like 100% better, we're still working on it. But it's that relationship that we're talking about. It's that respect that has been lost that needs to be recaptured. If we looked at the land as the relative, that it is, as the mother that is always reliable, always holding us, always feeding us, always cradling us, always taking care of us, giving us sun, food, water, air, all that we need to exist. and we respected her the way, you know, she should be respected, we would not treat the earth the way we do. We wouldn't have the issues that we're having with our carbon footprint and emissions, and just saying like, oh, you know, don't worry about what we toss into the oceans today. We'll figure it out later. You know, I just think that there's a huge loss of respect for the Mother Earth. And if we have that back, I think it's something that we really need to focus on. And some people are able that have that spiritual connection and know that we are all connected and we're humans having this experience here on earth, and you know, just plugged into that divine message. Some people are already doing that, and some of the rest of us just need to get a sense of what that is. And I think that we could be in much better relationship with the land.
Beautiful. You reminded me of somebody I heard speak, I think it was over 10 years ago. Her name is Ramona Africa. Have you heard of her?
It sounds familiar. Maybe I heard it from you.
Yeah, maybe. But she was a survivor of the bombing in, I think in Chicago during the what was it? The Democratic National Committee, when the riots happened in Chicago in the 60s or 70s. Well, the police used that as a ruse and a trick to bomb the Black Panthers headquarters in Chicago. And she was in the building when it was bombed. Well, when I heard her speak, I was blown away because she said all of the world's problems and solutions are related to one word: respect. If we could just respect each other, respect the earth, you know, like if you think of one problem, she said, give me problems. I'll tell you how it relates to respect, you know? And I respect people a lot. I love people, even the ones who don't like me. It could be difficult, but I have to change my perspective about them sometimes and think, well, how does their mother see them? Or if there's a God, how would God see that person? Because God or the mother probably see that person in a positive light, even if I have a hard time with it.
That's very true. I think a lot of the respect that I developed was from becoming a mother. It's just the way that you look at your child, the way you look at this being that you have no control over in the making, you know, and you have to love them regardless. And you do already. It's just an innate feeling. And so, yes, a lot can be learned from being a parent. And I think that's part of what just appalls me on a regular basis. I just can't understand, like, you know, the things that comes out of maybe Donald Trump's mouth every now and again. You know, you're just like, wow, are you someone's parent? How could you have less love for anyone else, you know, after having children? You already know the process. You've been through it, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it makes me wonder as a dad, does every dad have unconditional love for their children? Because if you do, it's hard to be mean to other people, right? If it's unconditional, right? Calling it a line of trust more than a line of credit. And I'm actually starting to lean fully away from line of credit, because credit is related to interest and fees. And our lines, let's say even going below 0 to negative 300, that's a line of trust, and it's our community's trust in me and my value that allows me to go below 0. Anything to add, Leanne?
Yeah. Any monetary system is actually circular, and when it is in a hyperlocal geography, it's like a petri dish. Just imagine a community that has highways that are going through it. They're coming in and going out, right? That would be US dollars. People drive in, or people hop onto that highway, they get paid, and then they leave, and it's gone. But if you have little roads that are going from shop to supplier in the supply chain, and people are spending and earning and spending and earning, it's completely cyclical. And that means, because we all have to drive our car around and earn and spend, that multiplier, which is what means that the initial dollar that is issued can be spent here and then spent somewhere else, it's actually infinite. I mean, you can create an infinite amount of GDP. The only given that you have unlimited resources, and as we just spoke about, the limit on our resources is somewhat imaginary because there's a lot of services, there's a lot of innovation that we can actually exchange with each other. And so if what this circuit is giving us is this reciprocity, we're driving around and we're actually in effect, the money is sort of being driven around in a circle. What we spend gets spent someone else, gets spent somewhere else, and then comes back to us so that we can finance our spending again. And that's where the line of trust is. The trust is that by me spending, I know I'm going to earn. And while that is a statistical phenomenon, it is true. It is a fact that if I spend and those next people keep spending it and earning it, at some point it's going to come back to me. And if not me, it's going to come back to someone in our community. So it's really critical to understand the interaction between people and not limit ourselves to just one person and their paycheck.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on, I really like the analogy of an expressway versus which I'll do like a roundabout kind of, or like a loop, right? One way, and this takes me to my second point, is looking at exactly what extracts value from communities. And two things could be fees from third-party sources or interest. And I love that in the CCPP, another component that you put is that there is 0% interest rates and no fees. What's backing that decision?
Well, let me take a step back because actually fees and interest take away from a community when they're not spent back into the community. So if a bank was to take fees and interest and spend them back into the community, then they too are circulating it. But what we know about financial entities is that they take money where the profits are the highest. So they're going to take it to Wall Street. They're going to take it and speculate in New York City or take it to what's called the center and leave us, the periphery, on the outside. So we're generating all this value added to our services and production of goods, but it's being taken away. So in the Hudson Valley Current, not only are we promoting circulation, but we're not charging interest and we're not charging fees. And so you get something that you can't get from those other groups that are really about taking the surplus and keeping it for themselves because they're maximizing their profit. That's how they make profit. Chris, on the other hand, in the Hudson Valley Current, it is not about making profit. It is about giving the community a tool to utilize their own resources to trade with each other and keep that money circulating around.
I was just so amazed by the research that Leanne put together for our trip to Japan. We were invited to speak at an international conference on community currencies. And I just learned so much about the current after years of really just doing it out of the passion of generosity, like I mentioned, and revealing abundance and sharing. And suddenly I meet Leanne and she's like, you have 6 years of beautiful data. I didn't even know, I knew we had data because of the software that we use is password protected, encrypted. It's an exchange software. But as she was able to analyze it for the RAMIX International Congress, it starts out with an amazing abstract and about 20 pages of narrative about what community currencies do in general, but also what they've done to the Hudson Valley with the current. And so one of my favorite images, this talks about how we issue currents into the system, how the system and all members are trading with each other, and how we're able to pull currents back out and keep regenerating the system. But what we were just talking about, well, this is beautiful too, because it shows how the currents have stayed in our community for 6 years. And if they bounce to New York, they bounce back because they're attracted back to us. Then finally, my favorite is this one, which Leanne calls neighborhoods. And over time, we found 5 neighborhoods of affinity groups develop naturally. So some might be graphic designers and publishers and writers. whereas another node and affinity group might be farmers, restaurants, and food workers. So this kind of research is what led us to really dive into COVID and do a 6-month study that will go even deeper.
So if you're a local business, you're probably finding, one, you aren't having income coming in, and you can't keep your staff employed, and you probably have to pay mortgages and pay for various expenses that are ongoing. They don't stop. You also may have to find that when you reopen, you're going to have to remodel your place. Like if you're a restaurant, you're going to have to put up some maybe barriers, or, you know, there's lots of different things with that people are thinking about that they're going to have to do, but where do they get the money for it? But where you're going to, what you do by applying for CPP, which is the Community Protection Plan, current Community Protection Plan, is that you are now accessing a line of trust. And what it means is you're building partnerships. You're building partnerships with the suppliers of that perspex that you might need to set up in your shop. You're building partners with the vegetables that you require. If you're, I'm thinking of a restaurant, of the vegetables that you require to serve on the plate. You're requiring all these partnerships with the suppliers of your business. And those partnerships are saying, I can't pay you now, I can pay you in current. Will you accept that? And if they say yes, because what you're doing by joining us is that you're joining a network. If they say yes to that, and we are going to help you find those providers, find those suppliers who can offer you all of these local products that you need to get your business up and running, you're going to be effectively sort of telling them, look, I can't pay you right now, but actually what you're telling is I'll give you current. And so now they're happy because they don't have that risk that you don't pay them. They have the current. So there's no counterparty risk. You pay them the current, and you now can establish and invest in your business. Perhaps you can even pay some bonuses to your essential workers. You can now have customers that come in, and those customers are being directed through the currents, through that membership, where members will see, oh, where can I spend my currents? Oh, I can spend them at this restaurant that just was able to open up that previously was closed. Let me go and spend them there. I have currents. I need to spend them. You're receiving them. Let me go spend them. And now what that business owner has done, they went negative when they spent up to $10,000. Now they receive money and they come back to zero again. And maybe they go up above. Maybe their account goes positive, which then allows them to go even back down again, down to the 10,000 again, and up to wherever, and back down to the 10,000 and up wherever. So it's a revolving fund of money that they can access. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's too complicated, I don't understand it. Just think about it in terms of barter. You were able to pay for all these inputs with all your customers purchasing your value added and your goods. And you were able to do that because you joined a network where everyone is able to do that if they're all connected in a circle.
Nice. Yeah, and that brings us to the exchange partners of the CCPP. To bring it back to your question, you're a local business owner. Depending on what type of business owner, the CCPP will affect you quickly or a little bit more slowly. So if you're a food-oriented business owner and you own a restaurant, you'll have access to 10,000 currents through the CCPP, which, like Leanne said, you can pay some of your employees, yourself. You can come shop at our store on the corner of Broadway and O'Neill in Kingston, or we can connect you with a graphic designer. For example, that's part of our existing network. But the beauty of the nonprofits, the food-oriented and the municipal, is nonprofits by design are on the edge of failure. They have to run out of money every year. That's what defines a nonprofit. If there's extra money in a nonprofit, it gets rolled back into the organization, and none of that extra money, or also called excess revenue, goes into anyone's pocket. It goes back to the organization. So most nonprofits run right near the edge by the end of their fiscal year. And so they are struggling very hard right now. So the CCPP is designed to help the agencies that can fail quickly. Nonprofits don't have great reserves or backup plans or capital campaigns. and for-profits often do. But restaurants are struggling. We all know that. Food-oriented farms that don't have demand anymore are struggling. So that's why we chose nonprofits and food-oriented first. And municipal is important because when those other agencies in this whole CCPP can pay taxes and fees, then the government becomes a crucial component of our economy, where we embrace the government and see its economic impact on all of our businesses. So cohort 2 will probably have nonprofits again, but then open it up to all for-profits because they are also crucial to our communities.
So we're going to, in the application process, we're going to ask nonprofits from this list of partners, from this list of other nonprofits that we have found, like where you can have retreats, or where you can purchase schooling, where you can go horse riding, where there are healthcare and wellness provisions. What do you need for your employees, for your job, for what you do? What do you need? Now, the thing is, people may, these nonprofits might first say, oh, I don't need anything because I never buy anything from those guys. But the thing is, you have surplus right now and no one is buying from you. No one is able, because they don't have income, to take the things you produce. So this is actually free in a way. All you have to do to access all of this richness and these services and goods for your employees, for your business, for your sector, lawyers, graphic designers, all these things that you may not have thought about before because you were always worried about the bottom line. Now we want you to expand. We want you to think about things in abundance, and we want you to think, wow, I have all these resources that are not being utilized. I just need to utilize them and pass them on, and I can receive all of this. Mm-hmm. And so what we're requiring is that at least in our first phase, we're going to ask, of that 10,000, think of where you can spend 1,000 and earn 1,000. Where can you offer your services of 1,000, and where can you receive services from the cohort of nonprofits that we have? Yeah. And it's going to be beautiful because you're going to have things that you never thought you could afford.
Yeah, and the example I've been using is, let's say there's the 10 nonprofits in this cohort, include plus the food oriented plus municipal, but 2 examples of nonprofits that have shown interest are the Artifact in Poughkeepsie and Kingston Midtown Rising in Kingston. And so Artifact could say, for 1,000 currents, we'll teach people how to do Zoom videos and Facebook Live. And Kingston Midtown Rising might say, for 1,000 currents, we'll put your logo on our banners when we have community events. Now, even the food-oriented groups can say, you know what, I need a training on Zoom too. I'm gonna hire that nonprofit to train us. And then Kingston Midtown Rising might use their 1,000 currents that they earn through the sponsorship to hire that food company to do catering for their board meetings. And so it's all very reciprocal. It keeps money local, and it teaches us who our neighbors are too. That's a beautiful part.
Yeah. Yes, and the emphasis is not on thinking about the bottom line and how can I maximize what I do. It's about how much can I give to my community, and by giving, I receive. Right,
and that could lead us to the municipal component. Kevius, do you have any specific questions about that?
No, I just want to know. Right now, I'm a municipality. How am I protected under this? It's just the last component of this.
Well, I heard from a municipal leader recently that the current is a real solution right now, whereas legislatures are making false promises on future dollars that may not exist. Because when we have a recession and those dollars become more scarce, then we're making false promises on a future that is uncertain. And that's a scary thing. But we've been planning for a recession now for about 10 years, and that is a not scary thing. It's very inspiring that here we are with the opportunity to stabilize our economy and demonstrate to the world how a community currency that is complementary with the national currency is a real solution. And so we don't have specific municipalities lined up. Although I am a town board member in the town of Rochester, I'll talk to my fellow town board members about how this extra 100,000 currents could help us. I'll take my pay in currents from the town board. Let's say Ulster County, Dutchess County, or Columbia County sign up. Now we're talking about a county where fees and taxes can be accepted. So the sky's the limit, like Leanne mentioned earlier, and we have abundance. And what we need are smart people like we've been meeting with all week. And thank you, Dr. Usher, for joining us to solve this and create the new problems and the evolution of, to create the new solutions in the evolution of currency.
Yeah, I think that what really stands is that everything that's being introduced to the CCPP lies under this umbrella of opportunity and capital. You know, two things that we desperately need in this environment, and two things that we recognize it takes a local currency because the dollar in a lot of ways doesn't allow for that to happen. So thank you too for being my, biggest inspirations and for this opportunity and just teaching me so much along the way about money, local currencies, and how to help our community through that relationship.
Thanks for helping
Thank
put this
you.
all together, Kevius.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kevius. Thanks, Chris. And I look forward to having workshops in the community where we can learn more about this and discuss it.
Nice. And I can't wait to dive into some more research with you next week.
Great.
Bye, Leanne.
All right,
Bye.
catch you guys on the other side.
This week we had a great time talking to amazing guests like Heinz Hoffner and Assemblyman Ron Kim, Shaniqua Bowden, Martin and Tamika Dunckley. Wonderful guests. I hope you enjoyed that.